Coming to you live from the shadow of the big house, it's IT4U, tips and tricks on ITS tools, products, services, and more with your host, Jean Mackey. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to IT4U. I'm your host, Jean Mackey, and these are interactive webinars brought to you by ITS. And if you're having any audio or video problems, tell us in the chat pod. If it's not on our end, we've got some troubleshooting tips for you. Here's a couple of links with mobile options for IT4U. And this is the collaboration series that's particularly focused on Google, C-Tools, Box. Coming up, couldn't nail down a date, but I know that it's going to happen in early December. Jeff Ziegler is going to talk about the hidden treasures of C-Tools, so that should be fun. If you are a person with a disability and you need an accommodation to participate, just let us know. Today, we've got M+Box shared accounts with Chris Steinhoff, and we'll get back to these resources, but without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
All right, good morning. So, like Jean said, today we're going to talk about shared box accounts. And to give a brief overview, when you log into Box with your UMISH unique name and password, what you're logging into is your individual account, your normal Box account, like you would have, where you can upload your files and do other things we've covered in other forums before, including a previous webinar in this series. We had a lot of questions about how people could use this tool for data that wasn't as closely tied to an individual and more would have a better home in a shared account or a shared space that was more associated with a department or a group or a unit. And what we've done is to create shared accounts. Box itself does not have a great way for us to use things like community groups and those kinds of that kind of functionality. So what we've done is we've created a process where you can request a shared account, and based on an community group, we'll use an community group as the basis to gather the information that we need in order to create a shared account. And then once you have it, you'll be able to go through and use it in different ways. And I'm going to go through some of the reasons you'd want one, what you do to get one, and I'll do a short demo of actually using one and doing a couple of basic tasks with a Box shared account. So, as I mentioned, one of the major reasons you'd want a shared account is for university as a place to host university data. These shared accounts don't change when an individual who's added files to them leave the university or change jobs or something like that. That's one challenge when using tools like Box or Drive or other things is what do you do with data and if an individual's uploaded it and shared it with their department, say, or their unit, what do you do once that person leaves? There's a much more complex process to share that out. These accounts have larger quotas than the individual accounts, 200 gigabytes. With your individual account, you get 50 gigs, which is great and very enough for almost everyone. And we felt that for departmental accounts, or shared accounts, 200 gigs would make it even more useful because there's potentially much more data. So we've also tried to design this functionality so that you don't have to actually log into the shared account to be able to take advantage of its features. I'll go through in the demo and some of the later slides how when the shared account gets created, you're actually added as a collaborator to content that the shared account owns, so that when you add things to that folder that you're collaborating on, it's not hitting your quota, it's hitting the 200 gigabyte quota of the shared account that you have access to. So we've seen a number of different places where accounts can be used for, these kinds of shared accounts can be used for a variety of different use cases in the university. Later on in the presentation, I'll go over some of the use cases that we've seen, and these are the kinds of things that we think are great for a shared account. But basically, these are cases where you don't want an individual tied to the presence on box, and the quota, and those kinds of things. You want to be able to disconnect that from individual users and have it more closely associated with your unit or your group or your department. So in order to request a shared account, you contact For Help through email or phone or online through Service Link. And that request process, that's how you make the request at this point. You contact the Service Center. And there's more information on our website. The URL is at the bottom of the screen on this slide. And an easier to type URL is box.it.umich.edu/info, and that will take you to, not to this page exactly, but to its parent page. So that'll take you to our general info page.
Say that one more time. Box.
It's box.it.umich.edu/info. And once the request is made and it comes to our group, we create the user, and at the same time, so we actually are creating a user in Box, and at the same time we're creating a folder that user owns, and looking at the members of the M community group that you submit with your request, and adding collaborators to that folder based on their role in the M community group. So if you're an owner of an M community group, you'll be set as a co-owner of the folder that the collaborator, that the shared account has ownership of. You'll be set as a co-owner, which will let you do everything that an owner can do, except I think maybe deleting the folder. Maybe you can even delete the folder. But if we'll take whichever people are owners, or sorry, the owners of the M community group become the co-owners of the Box folder, and any member of the M community group becomes an editor of the Box folder. So we're matching the rights and privileges from the M community group to the Box shared account. One thing that's important to remember is that we use the M community group as the to initialize the group, but we're not keeping these things in sync. So if you change things in your M community group, it'll be important to change them in Box as well. So, do you have a question?
Two questions. Relates to what you just said. Do we have to call for help to remove collaborators? And what about collaborators from outside U of L?
So we don't have to remove collaborators. You can do that on your own if you're a co-owner of the folder. So and add new collaborators. You can do that all within the Box interface, and you'll be able to use that to make those kinds of changes. And for external collaborators, you can also add external collaborators as long as they have a Box account of some kind, whether through their university or through it's a personal account that they've created. You can add those users like you would. And the folder for you as an individual user will appear in your individual Box account, and you'll have access to it as a co-owner or an editor, depending on how things have been set up, or how the co-owners have changed things as they've gone along. You could have been added as a collaborator on that shared folder as a viewer or a previewer or an uploader. There's different privileges in Box that could be set. So let's take a look at how it actually works. I have a few. Let's see. So here, this is my individual account, in Box. And I have a folder here that I'm currently the owner of. I can see over here in the sharing section that I'm the owner. My colleague Mary Beth is a co-owner, and our colleague Mandy is, I think she's an editor on this folder. Yeah, you can see here, editor. The owner and co-owner badges show up here, but the editor doesn't. Yes, a question.
What if we don't have an M community group for this particular team?
You can always create one, and that's something that you can do through the M community interface. It's easy to create a new group and add the owners and members that you want to add to that.
And you have to do that to have a shared account?
Yeah, we're having that be a requirement for the shared account. In fact, when you request a Box shared account, a Google shared account will be created also. So you'll get both. And the Google shared account has a lot of the same there's a lot of the same reasons that you might want to use it. There's a lot of and the similar benefits of not having the data directly associated with an individual user. So there's a lot of the benefits are very, very similar. So you can see in this folder that I'm the owner. This is my individual account. Let's see, you can see my email address and everything else that I've got in here. And for the purpose of this demo, I'd like to show the process of transferring the ownership of this folder from me to a shared account. And there's a couple of steps that I'll go through in order to show how to do that. We have for the Box team, we have a shared account, M+Box team at umich.edu, and when I invite the collaborator, see, I can't set him as an owner, so what I'll do is I can just invite him like a normal collaborator, us as a normal collaborator. So in that account we have it set up to automatically accept collaboration requests. So you can see here in the sharing section that the M+Box team account is a collaborator with the access level of editor. What I want to do is actually transfer the ownership of this folder that I own to this shared account. So one way to do that is to choose from this drop-down, changing this collaborator to folder owner. Now with Box, a folder can only have one owner, but it can have multiple co-owners. So when I ask to do this, Box gives me a warning. And it says making this collaborator the folder owner means that you will lose folder ownership and become an editor. Also, if there are any other collaborators, this folder will be moved to their root folder if it isn't already there. Do you wish to continue? And I will say okay. And now we can see that the M+Box team shared account is the owner of the folder. Mary Beth is still a co-owner, but I've been demoted to editor. I'd like to be a co-owner of this folder, and as a member of the M+Box team group, I can do that, and I'll show you the process of changing my own role, and it'll involve logging in as the M+Box team user, as the shared account itself. So in order to log into this account, I'll need to do a password reset to get there in the first place. So let's see, where's the actual, bring this email up. So let me open a different browser. Actually, I have this open in Firefox already. I'll log this out so I can show you the whole process. So this is our standard welcome page for our Box instance for the university. And what I'll do is log in. Instead of hitting continue, pressing continue takes me to cosign and through Shibboleth to do the single sign-on with Box. I don't want to do that in this case because the account that I have will not work through that single sign-on process. So what I'll use is this login using Box credentials link. I can also go there directly with box.com/login or going to box.com and hitting this login button. There's a number of ways to get there. I logged in earlier with this, so it's showing up here as M+Box team. But this is how it will look when you come here for the first time. Save a little bit of typing. And we have a password set for this account in order to be able to log in. If you haven't done that already, there's a reset password link, and you can go there directly through box.com/reset and enter the name of the team or the name of the shared account, M+Box, and hit reset password, and that sends an email to that email address. I'm a member of the M community group that's behind this email address, so I get that email. In fact, I'll go back to my inbox and we'll go to the top of it so we can see. Here it is. Your new box password awaits. I've got 2 of these in here, so it looks a little funny, but this is what the email looks like. And then I can use this link to actually reset the password, which I'm not going to do right now, but it's a pretty standard password reset form. Enter it twice and update. And you can also log out of applications that are already here. You won't need to worry about that if it's the first time you're setting the password. Do you have a question?
So even though the shared account boxes appear in your personal box view, in order to make any changes in the shared account, you'll need to go through this new sign-in process. Is that correct?
There are some changes that you'll have to do, for example, when I changed the ownership of that folder, since I lost the co-owner privilege and became an editor, I'm not able to promote myself to co-owner through that interface. So there are some tasks that you'll have to log in if you want to add additional folders to the shared account or do things like that. You do have to log in through this process. But for the most part, for everyday collaboration, adding new files, adding collaborators, changing the folder structure within the shared accounts folder, you can do that through your individual account and you don't have to go through this process. So this is I'll jump back to the Firefox. So in Chrome I have my individual account, and in Firefox I have the M+Box team account. So I will log in with the password I've set previously. And log in. And here we can see that there's a couple of folders in here already. One called M+Box team, and this one was, I think, created when the account was created. There's another one called M+Box shared, and I think Mary Beth created this one. I'm dragging it. And then the last folder here is the IT4U folder, which I just changed the ownership from myself to this shared account. And so that's this account's view, the M+Box team account's view of that folder. Another question?
If we already have a shared Google account for our group, will we still need to change the password for the shared Box account when we ask for it to be created?
Yes, you'll still have to set a password with Box in order to use the account with the Box password, or sorry, with the Box shared account. In order to use this account, you will have to set the password. You don't have to change the password or anything with Google. The difference here is that the passwords that we have with the Google shared accounts sync to Google. With Box, we don't have that functionality. We don't have that capability with Box. So you will still have to do the reset process. So this is the M+Box team shared accounts view of the folder that I just shared with it. And we can see that there's a very similar list of the list of the accounts that we're sharing with is the same. We have the M+Box team as the owner, Mary Beth is still a co-owner, I'm here as an editor, and Mandy is also an editor. Since I'm logged in in this Firefox session as the M+Box team account, I can come to this and take the same. I don't want to make myself a owner. I want to make myself a co-owner. And it gives me a different warning in this case. It says making this user a folder co-owner will mean that this user will have access to the same privileges and information as the owner does. Do you want to continue? In this case, I do. So I've made myself a co-owner. Mary Beth and I are co-owners, and the M+Box team is still the owner, and Mandy is still an editor. So if I go back to Chrome and look at the folder, I'll have to refresh because it hasn't detected that change. Here I can see myself again as a co-owner. So the difference in access level between a co-owner and editor is There's a couple of small differences. For the most part, as an editor, you can upload files, download files, delete files, do those kinds of changes. There's a couple of additional things that you can do as a co-owner. I don't have the list of those differences right here though. Okay, so that's the basic process of transferring that ownership from a folder that I created when I was an individual account and into a folder that was owned by a shared account, or into a shared account's possession really as the full owner. As a co-owner, I can still do all the things that I would do as basically as an owner, or as an editor, or the other access privileges. I can download files, I can upload things, I can edit things. I can really do the same kinds of things that I can with a folder that I own myself and that I'm collaborating with other users on. The main difference here is that the shared account now owns this folder, and if I were to leave the university and my Box and lost access to my Box account, and the Box account was deactivated or deleted, the people I'm collaborating with still have access to the content, and in this case, Mary Beth, the other co-owner, will still be the co-owner and will still have all the access she needs in order to be able to do her things. So I think that's the extent of what I was going to demo. We can come back to it to answer questions, though, certainly. Yes, a question.
If you have collaborators set up in a personal Box folder for lower level Box folders, will those permissions carry over when you switch its owner shared Box account?
Yeah, so it depends on the complexity of those permissions. Let me see if I can bring up our questions, or we've got documentation on our site about shared accounts. I think Mary Beth has this documented in the good practices for shared accounts page here. Let's see, the managing students. Basically, for the most part, we saw in this demo. Let's see, where is it here? That the permissions that Mandy had on this folder stayed the same, even though the ownership was transferred from me to the M+Box team account. The same should be true for subfolders, for the most part, largely because these ownership levels, the different privilege levels that we have, sort of trickle down into other accounts, or into other folders here. So if I create another folder, let's see, call it test 1. If we look at this folder, these permissions have trickled down into this folder. Mandy is still an editor, and those transferring these kinds of structures does work, is straightforward. If you've got a folder with a complex sharing structure with subfolders that have different, if you're sharing subfolders with different people, different lists of collaborators on different subfolders, it can get complex, and you can get some. One of the warning messages that we saw earlier in the demo was about moving folders to the root of a user's account. That's something that can happen, and you can end up with, a person can end up with shared accounts, or with it, once the ownership is transferred to a shared account, if they were added as a collaborator on subfolders, not on the root folder that you're changing the ownership of, sometimes those shared folders, those subfolders can end up in the user's root of their account. And I think we do have this documented. I don't have it right at the tip of my fingers. Let me just take a minute here here we are, moving content from personal to shared account. This is our best practice for moving, for the demo that I just did. And the second point here, I think, speaks to your question, that if you have collaborators on the subfolders, these, we're Mary Beth the way we've documented this is that in most cases it's best to remove the collaborators and add them back again. And the reason we have this as our advice is for complex setups, it can be confusing when the ownership changes, the way that the different collaborators on different subfolders might see things. For the most part, though, if your folder structure is very simple, if you have a list of collaborators at the top level, and that's the folder you're changing ownership of, and you don't have a lot of subfolders with different kinds of collaborators on them, if for example, the example I'm thinking of here is if we have a different collaborator on this folder. Let me see. What can I add here? We'll add my colleague Martin. So he'll be added as a collaborator on this folder. And you can see this section here in this folder only. And I think this is where having the collaborators in this folder only is where things get a little tricky. So if you don't have complexity like this, if we jump back up to the IT4U folder, Martin isn't listed in this list of collaborators, but he is listed as a collaborator in this folder only for this folder. So those are the kinds of situations that make transferring ownership a little bit sticky. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there are several different use cases that we feel really lend themselves well to shared accounts. Shared accounts are very useful for. And in these examples, we've been talking to different groups around the university for a while. So I think actually when we first spoke to these different groups, they weren't using shared accounts because we didn't have shared accounts as a feature of the service at the time. But the School of Social Work is doing some interesting things with doing video capture of client simulations. Their students practice their skills and use their phones to capture video of them doing practice sessions with simulated clients, and then they use the captured video and upload it to Box. And having the capacity of Box has been really useful for them. And you can imagine with video files get very big. Having that extra 200 gigs can be really useful. And the LSA, English and LSA have been using Box for the Prison Creative Arts Project, which is a case where you need access into Box from anyone, anywhere in the world. And what that allows is people can create a personal account in different parts of the world. Different contributors to this project can use that in order to do things with this project, and a group account would certainly be valuable there. And the Ford School of Public Policy is using Box for in their graduate career services for resume books for prospective employers. So what they used to do was have large printed books with their students' resumes, and they've started using Box instead to host that. And these are all good cases where a shared account would let that data be shared as the department's ownership instead of an individual who set up the folder. So if we have any other questions, I'll be happy to field them, or any other discussion. Okay.
Lynn says, so as the team evolves, new people are added, roles change, do we need to continually update the M community group?
Well, you might want to do that if you're using that M community group for email communications and things like that. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that the association between, or the information that we're getting from the M community group is we're only using it at the time when we create the folder. So if you're creating, if somebody new joins your group, it'll be important to add them to the M community group if you're using that for email communication and other access to other things, for instance. and also to add them to the shared folder that is in your Box account. And in this case, you saw me add Martin earlier, and this would have been that's the same process that you would use. You would add a collaborator, probably in this case probably to the top level of the folder.
So they're not automatically added?
They're not automatically added at this point. That kind of functionality where we keep groups in sync between mCommunity and Box is something that we are talking to Box about, and they realize that it would be extremely useful. I'm not sure exactly where that is on their roadmap at this point, though.
Let's see. The Box documentation for shared accounts talks about a new root folder being created when you switch the ownership for a personal Box account to I can't read it all.
I'm going to try to open it up, Gene.
Okay.
Go ahead.
When you switch the ownership for a personal account to a shared account, can you show that folder on the screen? And then Dwight wants to know, can you use an mCommunity group to assign viewer downloader permissions? And then there's another question.
Well, let's address those two. Yeah. So I think that for this shared account, the M+Box team account, the M+Box team folder is what was created when the account was created. I think that the M+Box shared folder has an earlier update date, but I think that's because this was a folder that Mary Beth transferred into this account. The folder that the team owns that's created is basically it's going to be an empty folder with a README file in it. We add that automatically just to explain what's this folder, right? This shows up in your personal account, and it's basically just a text file that says that this is a folder that was created for this account, and has a link for questions to the service center. So that's the folder that you get, actually. Let's see if we go back a level here. It'll be these are things that we've added since, but basically it'll be an empty folder that contains, well, it'll be a folder that only contains this readme.txt file. And the other question was about mCommunity and whether we can use the membership there to add uploaders or previewers. The answer is no, we don't take any information from mCommunity for that. If you wanted to add an uploader or a previewer, you could do it by adding a user and then setting their access level to be viewer or previewer or uploader, that kind of thing, or you can remove the user here too. So that's how we set those permissions.
Two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Brian wants to know, are there recommended practices for digital housekeeping, i.e. auto-expire options for project folders?
There are some things that we can do here. I think we can. There is some functionality in Box that'll let us auto-expire. I think that those are actually associated with links. So if you use a shared link, you can set it so that it'll expire after a while. Let me close this. I don't recall exactly how to bring that up. In terms of recommendations, though, we don't have a list of best practices because it's going to vary wildly from group to group or unit to unit. Exactly what the best way is for your data in particular. Is there another question?
Lynn says we've had trouble getting non-UM collaborators logged into M+Box. Any suggestions? And for example, I'm curious about how the board shares their files with external employers.
So I think in that case, they're probably sharing. I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I think they're probably doing it. One way they could do it is to have a folder that has a shared link that is set to open, right? So this is anyone with the link can get in, and we're not required to log in even. We can also restrict things to the company or collaborators only. And actually, here's where we can set that expiration for the link. And when we do that, we can actually have it delete. So there's the answer for the previous question that I didn't find when I was answering that. But what you can share things with a link, or you can explicitly collaborate with someone. And so this one is set to collaborators only. If a user got a hold of this link and they tried to use it to get to this folder, they would not be allowed to use it unless they were one of these 5 users here. So sharing things, it'll depend on how restricted you need to make access to your content, but you can set the access to different levels depending on what makes sense for your use case.
I'm wondering what kinds of problems Lynn had with non-UM collaborators.
I know you mentioned earlier that they may need to make a Box account.
Yeah.
Right.
Non-U of M.
Right.
I've had that.
Right. There might be, if it's somebody outside the university and you need to restrict the access to the folder to collaborators only, which in many cases for the kinds of things that you'll be sharing, that's probably what you want to do. You don't want to just open things wide. But there are other cases where you want to share your content widely, like in the case of the resume books. I can't speak exactly to how they're doing it because I don't know. But one way to do something like that would be to provide access to a link that's open to anybody who can get a hold of the link, because that's the kind of thing that you want to sort of publish and disseminate. So it's the difference between collaborating on internal documents and publishing external documents. Box is it's a good tool to use for both cases.
Any other questions? Guess not.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks a lot. And feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. The best way to do that is through the Service Center, and they can escalate to us as needed. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And you all had some great questions. Back to my little PowerPoint. All right, so Chris gave us a couple of resources here. General M+Box information. There's a link for info on shared M+Box accounts, and those links will work when you play back the recording also. The recording of this session will be listed in the IT4U page in MyLink, and NextGen Michigan also has a place where you don't have to log in. You can watch the collaboration recordings. If you're not on my email list, you can sign up, and if you need additional assistance, Tiffany wants to know will we be able to download the PowerPoint. Maybe Chris will be kind enough to give me a link, and I'll send that out today. And call the Service Center if you need other help. Thanks very much. We're going to stop the recording now, but if you're here live, please stick around to give us some feedback.